There's a photograph sitting on my desk right now, and if you walked into my room unannounced, you would catch me talking to it. Not whispering, not muttering, actually talking, the way you talk to someone who might answer back. It started the way most strange habits do, quietly, almost accidentally, in a moment so raw that logic completely left the building. Grief has a way of making you do things your former self would have raised an eyebrow at, and I'm not even slightly embarrassed about that anymore. The photograph is of my father, taken sometime in 1987, wearing a ridiculous mustache he was inexplicably proud of, squinting into the sun like he owned it. Every morning, before the coffee's even ready, I pull up a chair and I start talking about the day ahead, about something funny that happened, about how I still can't figure out what he would have thought about streaming services or electric cars. Now, here is where it gets psychologically interesting, because researchers will tell you that what I am doing has a name. It is called continuing bonds theory, and it turns out millions of people do this without ever knowing it has a clinical label. The science suggests that maintaining a symbolic relationship with someone who has died is not pathological. It is actually one of the more functional things a grieving person can do. We have been sold this idea that grief is a timeline, a neat little 5-stage highway with an exit ramp called closure, and I want to tell you that idea is, with great respect, complete fiction. Closure is a concept invented for people who are uncomfortable watching other people mourn, and talking to a photograph is one of the most honest rejections of that myth I know. What do I actually say though? Because that is the question you are really here for, and I am not going to dodge it. Some mornings, I say something as simple as, "I miss you today more than yesterday." And some mornings, I give him a full business update on my life, like he is an investor who deserves a quarterly report. There was one Tuesday, about 3 months after he passed, when I told the photograph that I was angry at him for leaving before I figured out who I was, and I said it out loud into the room to a glossy 4x6 rectangle. What came back was silence, obviously, but what I felt was this bizarre, weightless relief, like I had put something down that I did not realize I had been carrying in both arms. The irony here is almost too on the nose. I'm a person who believes in evidence and reason, and yet the single most emotionally productive ritual in my life involves one-sided conversations with a chemical print on paper. The absurdity is not lost on me, and I think that is actually part of why it works. You cannot take yourself too seriously while doing it, which cracks you open just enough to feel something real. People who have never lost someone they were genuinely tethered to will hear this and think it sounds like a coping mechanism for someone who has not moved on. People who have lost someone they were genuinely tethered to will hear this and quietly nod, possibly while glancing at their own photograph across the room. History is full of people who talked to the absent sailors, who wrote letters to wives who could not receive them for months, soldiers who carried photographs into trenches and addressed them nightly, entire cultures that built ancestor altars specifically so the living could keep speaking to the dead. We did not invent this behavior in the modern era. We just stopped being public about it, because somewhere along the way, vulnerability became embarrassing. Here's the practical truth that nobody in a grief pamphlet will say plainly. Talking to a photograph is not about the photograph. It is about you practicing the muscle of continuing to exist in relationship to someone who shaped you. It keeps the neural pathways of that connection active. It keeps your emotional vocabulary from atrophying, and it gives you a private space where no one needs anything from you. The misconception I hear most often is that this behavior is a sign that someone is stuck, frozen in time, like a stopped clock in a wedding dress. But the data does not support that. Studies on continuing bonds show that people who maintain symbolic relationships with deceased loved ones often demonstrate better long-term adjustment, not worse. What it brings me emotionally is something I would describe as structured tenderness, a 5-minute window each day where I am allowed to be a son again, uncomplicated by the performance of being a functional adult. It does not fix the loss, it does not fill the space, but it keeps the space from becoming a void. Some days I laugh at the photograph because I will tell him something I did and I can practically hear his reaction, and it is usually at my expense. The relationship, weirdly, has continued to develop. I know him differently now than I did when he was alive, because grief has a way of clarifying who someone actually was versus who you needed them to be. The lesson I would offer you, if you are carrying your own photograph, metaphorically or literally, is this: the ritual matters more than the logic behind it, and you owe no one an explanation for how you grieve. Disciplined emotional practice, showing up to feel things consistently in small doses without spiraling, is more sustainable than occasional emotional avalanches. At the end of every conversation with that photograph, I say the same thing: I'm still paying attention. It means I am still noticing things worth telling him about, which means I'm still present in my own life, which is the whole point. Grief without a ritual is just weight with no container. And a photograph with a voice in front of it is as good a container as any philosopher or therapist has ever designed. The discipline is not in moving on, it is in moving forward with the weight distributed more evenly, 1-2 sentence conversation at a time. If this resonated with you in any way, hit subscribe and go check out our other topics because we get into all of it.